My dear students, Assalamu alaikum. Hope all of you are keeping well and staying safe with your family. And also you are keeping a good contact with your study because it is a long gap. You have to keep your contact with your study, otherwise you will start forgetting. So always keep yourself up to date with the study. And today we are going to discuss a very common topic for developing country, that is abdominal tuberculosis. It is not a hard topic, but it is a very important topic because in your practical life you will have to manage lot of patients with tuberculosis. Tuberculosis is a global burden. It is not only for our country, it is a global burden, especially in the developing countries and underdeveloped countries. You can see the pictures. They are very painful, painful pictures, but they are living around us, suffering from poverty, poor hygiene, overcrowding, malnutrition, as well as due to the appearance of uh, drug resistant tuberculosis, and together with the increase in the number of immunocompromised patients uh, after the arrival of HIV infection in the community, the burden of tuberculosis has increased a lot, especially in the developing and underdeveloped countries. So globally, about 10 million people develop TB yearly. It's a huge number. 10 million people yearly throughout the world in a particular year. And about 1.5 million people die of tuberculosis each year. Abdominal TB comprises about 5% of all TB cases. Among the total number of tuberculosis, 5% cases are abdominal tuberculosis. And GI tuberculosis is the sixth most frequent site of extrapulmonary involvement. So many a time when you will work in the hospital, you will find the patients of GI tuberculosis. Bangladesh is one of the top 6 high burden countries. So tuberculosis is very common in our country. And you know, our population is densely populated, and uh, they have poor hygiene, lack of knowledge about hygiene, lack of practice about good hygiene. So they are suffering a lot. Moreover, they are malnourished, and they are suffering a lot from the tuberculosis. Abdominal tuberculosis affects the gut, the peritoneum, abdominal lymph nodes, and solid organs. Solid organs like liver, pancreas, spleen, or kidney can be affected, and other organs also can be affected with tuberculosis. Among the pathogens, the common one is Mycobacterium tuberculosis. You know, this is an acid-fast aerobic bacteria. It is the commonest for the development of abdominal tuberculosis. The other one is Mycobacterium bovis, but nowadays it is becoming less common or rare. And in some patients who are suffering from, who are immunocompromised, like patient of HIV or patient getting chemotherapeutic drugs or patient on maintenance hemodialysis, they're immunocompromised. They might develop tuberculosis with some atypical mycobacteria, like Mycobacterium avium intercellulare. But the common one is Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Types of abdominal tuberculosis, actually, this is depending on the site of involvement. When the tuberculosis affect the lymph nodes of abdomen, we call it tubercular lymphadenopathy. When it involves the peritoneum, it is peritoneal tuberculosis. When the gastrointestinal tract is involved, we can call it gastrointestinal tuberculosis. And when the solid organs like spleen, liver, kidney are involved, we can call it visceral tuberculosis. So there are tubercular lymphadenopathy, peritoneal tuberculosis, gastrointestinal tuberculosis, and visceral tuberculosis. How abdominal TB develops, how the organism is uh, entering into the abdomen to cause the disease. The commonest one is swallowed organism. When a person is swallowing some food, maybe milk, dairy product, or any other food, or swallowing the sputum, if that content has organism like Mycobacterium tuberculosis, it will enter into the gut, and it will cross the mucosa and cause abdominal tuberculosis. The next one is hematogenous spread. Hematogenous spread is from a distant tubercular foci. Suppose a person is suffering from pulmonary tuberculosis. So that from that foci, the tubercular bacteria can pass via the blood to the abdomen. It is hematogenous spread. It is the second most common one. The third one is contagious spread, direct spread from an adjacent organ which one is suffering from tuberculosis. Like in case of female, if the fallopian tube is infected with tuberculosis, or it can come from psoas sepsis or tubercular sacroiliitis, the infection can spread to the abdominal cavity. These are contagious spread. And sometimes tuberculosis comes to the abdominal cavity via the lymphatics, especially when there is tubercular lymphadenopathy. From that lymph node, the bacteria passes through the lymphatics to the abdominal cavity. So these are the four way how the abdomen gets infected with tubercular bacteria, but the commonest one is swallowed organism. This is the diagrammatic presentation of pathogenesis of intestinal tuberculosis. You can see that here at first the person is ingesting some food or sputum containing Mycobacterium tuberculosis. It is entering into the gut, then it is crossing the mucosa of the gut, entering into the submucosa where it is forming the granuloma, and here you can see the granuloma. And at the center of the granuloma, ultimately caseation necrosis develops, and it is manifested by ulceration of the overlying mucosa. And from that caseation, the bacteria can also spread into the deeper layers of intestine. And from there, it can spread into adjacent lymph nodes and peritoneum. So it is entering with the food and sputum, going to the lumen of the gut, crossing the mucosa, entering the submucosa, forming granuloma, followed by caseation necrosis and surface ulceration of the mucosa, and entering into the deeper layers, followed by spread to other parts like into the lymph nodes and peritoneum. So this is how the tuberculosis bacteria is entering into the abdomen and spreading from that site. So what are the sites? Site can be any part of the GI tract can be involved, but the commonest one is ileocecal region. Any part of the GI tract can be involved with tuberculosis, but the commonest one is ileocecal region. You can see about 75% of gastrointestinal tuberculosis develops at the ileocecal region. So this site is so common. So if the ileocecal region is the commonest site of abdominal tuberculosis, the question is why? Because it is representing about 75% of the abdominal tuberculosis. There might be some cause. Yes, obviously there are some causes like, first of all, stasis. As there is a ileocecal valve, when the contents are passing from the ileum to the cecum, and there is an ileocecal valve, so over here, uh, the passage of luminal content is slower. It is passing very slowly at that region. So the bacteria over there is getting more time to cross the mucosa. It is in contact with the mucosa for a prolonged period. So it can pass through the mucosa of the ileocecal region. Number two, In at the terminal ileum, there are a lot of pairs patches, the lymphoid aggregates, and this is the target of the tubercle bacilli. So, as there is lot of pairs patches, it is a site vulnerable for the development of tuberculosis. Number three, the luminal content at the ileocecal region is alkaline. And in what happens in acidic environment, the bacterial growth is suppressed in acidic environment. But as the luminal content at this area has become alkaline, so bacterial growth is not suppressed. So the bacteria can survive over there and it can replicate. So this alkaline environment is helpful for the bacteria. Moreover, there is very less digestive activity and maximum absorption at the terminal ileum, which is also very much helpful for the bacteria to cross the mucosa and enter into the submucosa. So these are the causes. That is why the ileocecal region is the most vulnerable area for the development of gastrointestinal tuberculosis. Now, what are the types of GI tuberculosis? Depending on the gross appearance, it is of three types, like ulcerative type, hypertrophic type, and ulcerohypertrophic type. The ulcerative type, the name itself suggesting that it is like that of an ulcer. So, and it is the commonest one also. About 60% of cases are represented by ulcerative type of GI tuberculosis. 60% cases, the commonest one. But it involves the epithelial surface only. It involves the epithelial surface. And the ulcers are usually transverse ulcers. So it is the commonest one, representing 60% cases. It is involving the surface of the mucosa, and the ulcers are transverse ulcers. Moreover, ulcerative type of GI tuberculosis occurs by very virulent viruses. Those viruses are very virulent. They cause ulcerative type of GI tuberculosis, and in those patients who are immunocompromised. So, in a immunocompromised patient with a virulent Mycobacterium tuberculosis can cause ulcerative type of GI tuberculosis. Next one is hypertrophic type. It is represented by 10% of cases. There will be fibrosis and there will be scar formation. So there will be a mass formation in the abdomen. You can even palpate it, you can feel it. And the most common site is right iliac fossa. Uh, and in this situation, the bacteria. So bacteria are less virulent, the bacteria are less virulent and the person has got a good immune response. So in hypertrophic type, the bacteria is less virulent, patient has got a good immune response. It is representing 10% of GI tuberculosis. There will be fibrosis, there will be scarring, and you will get a palpable lump mostly in the right iliac fossa region. A third one is ulcerohypertrophic. There is overlapping of both types of feature of ulcerative and hypertrophic types. Both are present in this scenario. 10% of cases are ulcerohypertrophic. You will find ulcer as well as scar and fibrosis in these patients. Histopathology. In histology, granuloma with central caseation is the hallmark of tuberculosis. Hallmark for the diagnosis of tuberculosis is granuloma with central caseation. If you look into the pictures of histology, you will find there are granuloma formed in the site of tuberculosis. These are the granuloma. And if you get a more zoomed view, you will find over there are Langer's giant cell. Actually, these granuloma are formed by aggregation of Langer's giant cells. And Langer's giant cells are formed by the union of macrophages. So it is known as multinucleated giant cell because these are the union of quite a number of macrophages. They are forming Langer's giant cell. And these aggregation of Langerhans cells are forming the granuloma. And in course of time, there is central necrosis, giving rise to caseating necrosis. That is why we used to tell that granuloma with central caseating necrosis is the hallmark for the histological diagnosis of tuberculosis. Clinical features. Abdominal tuberculosis is predominantly a disease of young adult. It is a disease of young adult, though it can happen at any age. No age is immune from tuberculosis, but frequency is more in young adults. And the presentation is usually chronic, but it may be acute and chronic, acute or acute and chronic. Like we know that tuberculosis is a chronic process. The patient may come to you with a history of several months. But suppose the patient was suffering from abdominal tuberculosis, a tuberculous foci in the terminal ileum for several months. But this time he developed intestinal obstruction due to narrowing, due to edema of that affected area. There is luminal narrowing and the patient developed intestinal obstruction. So the patient is coming to you with the feature of acute or chronic symptoms. That is why it is told that tuberculosis can be chronic, it may be acute, or it may be acute and chronic. Features varies according to the site of lesion. We mentioned that tuberculosis can affect any part throughout the GI tract. So feature will vary according to the site of involvement. Like if a person has tuberculosis in the esophagus, so he will complain of dysphagia. If the tuberculosis is at the duodenum, the patient will complain of vomiting due to narrowing of the duodenal lumen. If the tuberculosis is at the terminal ileum, the patient will present to you with features of intestinal obstruction. If the tuberculosis is in the colon, the patient might come to you with the feature of diarrhea or constipation. So the presentation will depend upon the site of involvement. But for tuberculosis involving any part of the body, there are some constitutional symptoms. We call it constitutional symptom. Like the patient will say that I have fever, I have anorexia, weakness, weight loss, I'm lethargic, I'm always tired. So these are constitutional symptoms. And constitutional symptoms are more common, more profound in pulmonary tuberculosis. In GITB, it is less, but obviously it is there, but the severity is less. Moreover, the patient of GI tuberculosis can come to you with some pulmonary symptoms if the lungs are also involved in the tuberculosis process. Otherwise, not. If the lungs are, if the patient has got pulmonary TB, in that case, you will get some pulmonary symptoms. Now come to the GI symptoms. What are the GI symptoms in case of gastrointestinal tuberculosis? And the commonest one is abdominal pain. About 80 to 90% cases of patient will come to you with abdominal pain. But there is difference. Some will come to you with colicky pain. Some will come with dull, aching, constant pain. So if you think about the pathology, what the tuberculosis is doing in that patient, if it is causing a narrowing of the intestinal lumen, giving rise to intestinal obstruction, then the patient will complain to you with colicky pain. But if there is involvement of the abdominal lymph nodes, or if there is involvement of the peritoneum, which is not causing any luminal narrowing, but there is inflammation of the peritoneum or lymph nodes, you will get dull, aching, constant pain. Some patient will complain of loose motion, especially the person who develop ulcerative type of tuberculosis will complain more loose motion. Some will complain of constipation. Constipation more develops in patients who has hypertrophic type of lesion, because due to hypertrophy there is luminal layering, there is intestinal obstruction, So the patient will complain of abdominal distension, bloating, colicky pain together with constipation. Sometimes the patient will complain of blood in the stool, though parectal bleeding is not a common feature of tuberculosis. But if the tubercular lesion, if the ulcer involve any mucosal blood vessel, the patient may complain of parectal bleeding. Or many a time you can get that the stool for occult blood test is positive. So blood in the stool is another feature. Patient who has esophageal tuberculosis or tuberculosis involving the gastroesophageal junction region, so they will complain dysphagia due to narrowing of that area. And already I have mentioned if there is tuberculosis at the duodenum or proximal jejunum causing narrowing of the intestinal lumen, it will cause vomiting. Many a time, the patient will come to you with a complaint of abdominal lump. Abdominal lump, palpable abdominal lump. If you examine the patient, you will also get a palpable lump. And commonest site is right iliac fossa due to ileacecal tuberculosis. So, palpable lump is a very significant symptom. Whenever a patient complains of a palpable lump, you have to take it very seriously because who knows, it can be tuberculosis, it can be carcinoma, it can be lymphoma, it can be appendicular lump. So, it is very important to address it and take necessary steps. So, what are the differential diagnoses that we need to think about when a person is coming to us with the history of anorexia, nausea, weight loss, low grade fever, abdominal pain, sometimes palpable lump. So, what should be our differential diagnosis? Our first one would be abdominal malignancy. Abdominal malignancy, because we know that in malignancy, the patient develops abdominal pain, they have anorexia, they have progressive weight loss. Some patient might have ascites, some patient might have some palpable lump. So all these matches with the features of tuberculosis. So abdominal malignancy, especially in elderly patient, should be in our differential diagnosis. Very important one. Next one is Crohn's disease. The symptoms of Crohn's disease are very similar to that of tuberculosis. Very similar. The patient has got some constitutional symptoms as well as Crohn's disease also causes luminal narrowing due to fibrosis, can give rise to subacute or acute intestinal obstruction. Moreover, when you go for investigation, suppose you advise for a colonoscopy to directly see whether there is any lesion in the colon. When we do colonoscopy, we see the terminal ileum. Uh, Terminal ileum is also the commonest site of involvement of Crohn's disease. As we mentioned, it is the commonest site for tuberculosis. So if we get an ulcer at the terminal ileum, again we will become confused whether it is tuberculosis or it is Crohn's disease. So what we will do to get come out from our confusion, we'll take the biopsy, and in histopathology report you will again become confused because as granuloma is formed in the tubercular lesion, granuloma is also formed in the lesion of tuberculosis. Sorry, Crohn's disease. So both are similar. But the only difference is in tuberculosis, you will get caseation necrosis at the center of the granuloma. But in the Crohn's disease, you will get the granuloma, but you will not find the caseating necrosis. Next is abdominal lymphadenopathy. Abdominal lymphoma. Yes, abdominal lymphoma is a good differential diagnosis because in tuberculosis, in tubercular lymphadenopathy, there are enlarged abdominal lymph nodes. In case of abdominal lymphoma, you will also get enlarged abdominal lymph nodes. Moreover, in tuberculosis, patient used to complain of evening rise of temperature, which is also common in abdominal lymphoma. In tuberculosis, there are abdominal pain. In lymphoma, the patient may complain of abdominal pain. So there are some similarity, and it is in our differential diagnosis. Malabsorption from other diseases. Yes, tuberculosis causes malabsorption because we know that a lot of nutrients are absorbed from the ileum, especially terminal ileum region, and this is the commonest site of involvement of tuberculosis. So the absorptive surface is reduced in abdominal or intestinal tuberculosis due to involvement of the small intestine, especially the ileum. So all other diseases that can give rise to malabsorption are in the differential diagnosis of tuberculosis. Appendicular lump, yes, sometimes the patient will come to you with the complaint of abdominal pain, complaint of fever, and when you will examine the patient, you will find a lump over the right iliac fossa. So in case of acute appendicitis followed by lump formation, patient will give the history of abdominal pain and fever, which can also be present in tuberculosis. Abdominal pain and fever followed by a lump in the right iliac fossa. So appendicular lump is also in the differential diagnosis. What are the complications that may develop in case of tuberculosis, intestinal tuberculosis? Intestinal obstruction is a very frequent complication. It is the commonest complication, as we have already mentioned, due to as tuberculosis is a chronic disease. The patient is suffering for months together, so there is chronic inflammation, and that chronic inflammation is giving rise to fibrosis for several months, and so there will be luminal narrowing due to those fibrosis, and that narrowing will give rise to intestinal obstruction. So it is very common in abdominal or intestinal tuberculosis. In this picture, you can see there are some gas distended bowel loops, and there is also air fluid level. Air fluid level suggests intestinal obstruction. So this is these are the X-ray of intestinal obstruction containing gas distended bowel loops and air fluid level, suggesting intestinal obstruction. There may be perforation, though it is not very common. It is less common. But if the tuberculosis involves through and through, involving all layers of the gas-containing intestinal hollow viscus, it will give rise to perforation. GI bleeding also already we have discussed. It is possible but less common. If the tubercular ulcer involving any mucosal blood vessel can cause GI bleeding. Abscess formation is also possible when there is especially if there is fistula formation or there through and through involvement of the wall of the intestinal loop, it will give intra-abdominal abscess formation. External fistula also can happen in tuberculosis, especially the anterocutaneous fistula. Anterocutaneous fistula can happen in tuberculosis, but it is more common after surgery. Suppose a patient with intestinal tuberculosis has got surgery, there is more chance of development of external fistula along the line of the surgical suture. And malabsorption, we have already discussed due to the reduction in the absorptive surface due to involvement of small intestine, especially ileum in tuberculosis, it will give rise to malabsorption. Now, what are the investigations that you are going to suggest to confirm your diagnosis? Because tuberculosis is a disease you will not only diagnose with the help of investigation. You will take the help of the history. That is very important. Then you will examine the patient, the physical finding. It will give you some differential diagnosis. Then you have to confirm your diagnosis and you have to exclude the differential diagnosis. So investigations will help you in this area. The commonest one is CBC, complete blood count. We will go for a complete blood count because in tuberculosis, you will find that the total count is normal. Normally, the total count is normal. The WBC count is not increased. But the patient may be mildly anemic because the patient is reluctant to take food, malnourished, and there is every chance of GI bleeding also. So he may develop anemia of chronic disease. He might be mildly anemic, and the important one is you will find that the ESR is very high because tuberculosis is a disease well known for its presentation with high ESR. the ESR will be various. So you will find that the WBC count is normal, patient is mildly anemic, and the ESR is high. Tuberculosis test is nowadays it is not a very important test. The sensitivity and specificity is not that high, and nowadays lot of investigations have become available for the diagnosis of tuberculosis. So tuberculosis test, yes, it is done. It is done for several years together, but nowadays it is not very important test. X-ray chest PAView, yes, we'll do an X-ray chest PAView because abdominal TB in 15 to 25% cases may also have pulmonary tuberculosis. Abdominal TB, not all abdominal TB. Only 15 to 25% of cases can have also pulmonary tuberculosis. So to detect the involvement of the lungs, you can go for chest X-ray. And this is a chest X-ray. You can see, you can look into the X-ray. The upper part of the right lung is involved. Here are the opacity is in the upper part of the right lung, and there are some cavity formation. This is a cavity, this is a cavity, these are the cavity. So these are cavitary lesions. So cavitary lesion more suggests the presence of tuberculosis. And this might be an open case. When there is cavity in the tubercular lesion in the lungs, we used to say that this might be an open case. Open case means tubercle bacilli, the presence of tubercle bacilli in the sputum may be present in this patient. The chance is high. In an open case, the chance of presence of tubercle bacilli in the sputum is high. So if the sputum is present in the, if the Mycobacterium tuberculosis is present in the sputum, and if the patient swallow that sputum, it can go to the gut and cause abdominal tuberculosis. That is why X-ray chest is an important investigation. So our next investigation after the chest X-ray view will be a plain X-ray abdomen in erect posture. If the patient has got some feature of intestinal obstruction or subacute intestinal obstruction. Suppose the patient is complaining to you with abdominal pain. So in that case, you will go for a plain X-ray abdomen to see whether there is any air fluid level, whether there is any distended gas distended bowel loop, or whether there is air fluid level. So you can see in this plain X-ray abdomen in erect posture, you see these are the air level, this is the fluid level. This is air level, this is fluid level. This is air level, this is fluid level. So there are a lot of air fluid level in the abdomen of this patient, and it is suggesting that there is an intestinal obstruction of this patient. So our next investigation will be ultrasonography of whole abdomen. It is a very important investigation because ultrasound will give you some important information, like it can say that there is lymphadenopathy within the abdomen. So if there is enlargement of the lymph node in the abdomen, ultrasonography will give you the information. Moreover, it can say if there is any ascites, ultrasound will give you the information. And ultrasonography will also exclude other differential diagnosis. Suppose intra-abdominal malignancy was in our differential diagnosis. So to exclude malignant involvement in the solid organs in the abdomen, we can take the help of ultrasonography. The next one is ascitic fluid study, which is a very important investigation in case of abdominal tuberculosis or in any patient who is coming to you with ascites. It is a very important investigation, ascitic fluid study. This is the morphological feature of the ascitic fluid of abdominal tuberculosis. You can see the straw color of the fluid, straw color of the fluid in case of abdominal tuberculosis. Then you will send the fluid for biochemical test, for cytological test, and other tests we'll discuss now. You'll send the patient for biochemical test. So you see the protein content. You see the protein content of the ascitic fluid. We know that depending on the protein content, ascites may be of two types. One is transudative ascites, the other one is exudative ascites. In transodative ascites, the protein content is less than 2.5 gram per deciliter. But in case of exudative ascites, the protein content is more than 2.5 gram per deciliter. And in tuberculosis, the ascitic fluid is exudative. That means the protein content will be high. It will be more than 2.5 gram per deciliter. So in tuberculosis, the ascites is exudative ascites. Then if you send the ascitic fluid for cytology, you will find that in case of abdominal TB, the total count of WBC is more than 500 per cubic millimeter of ascitic fluid. And most of the cells are lymphocytes. So WBC count is more than 500 and most of the cells are lymphocyte. This is very important because in case of bacterial peritonitis, you will find that most of the cells are neutrophil. But in case of tuberculosis, you will find that most of the cells are lymphocytes. If every stain is done in the fluid of ascitic fluid, you will get in less than 3% cases the AFB is positive over there. So it is not a very helpful investigation here because uh, frequency of getting a positive result is less than 3%. But it is done, it is seen. Then you can send the ascitic fluid for serum adenosine deaminase. Serum adenosine deaminase to see the level of serum adenosine deaminase. Sorry, not all as serum. You can send the test ADA for the ascitic fluid also. You will send the ascitic fluid or pleural fluid or pericardial fluid, any fluid, if you send the fluid for ADA, adenosine deaminase test, it is a very sensitive test and very specific test because in 93% cases you will get the ADA level is high in peritoneal fluid or pleural fluid or pericardial fluid if the cause is tuberculosis. So it is a very sensitive, 93% sensitivity and 97% specificity. Then we will send the fluid for PCR for Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Polymerase chain reaction test for Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and you will find it positive if the ascites is due to tuberculosis. Our next investigation will be colonoscopy. Yes, with the help of colonoscopy, we can directly visualize the lesion as well as we can take biopsy from there. So in colonoscopy, you will find that there is ulceronodular lesions. There are no lot of nodule formation in the mucosa together with the presence of ulceration. These are the ulcerations. These are the nodules. These are the mucosal nodules, ulceration. So in colonoscopy, you will get some ulceronodular lesions. This is another picture of colonoscopy. See, this is the cecum. Here is the ileocecal valve. So, lot of flat ulcers are involving the cecum and ileocecal valve. So, this is an ulcerative type of GI tuberculosis. But if you compare with this picture, there are some hypertrophy, mucosal hypertrophy over here. You can see looks like a growth, but actually this is mucosal hypertrophy of tuberculosis. So it is a hypertrophic type. If you look in this picture, picture C or picture F, you can see there is narrowing. There is the lumen is very. This is a normal lumen, but here there is narrowing of the lumen. So this patient has already developed intestinal obstruction. So with the help of colonoscopy, you can test, you can examine in detail the tubercular lesion. Moreover, you can take biopsy to confirm your diagnosis. Then we go for barium follow-through. Barium follow-through will uh, show you there is narrowing. You can see there is narrowing of the lumen. So it is narrowing at the terminal ileum, narrowing at the cecum, and narrowing at the ascending colon. So barium follow-through will give you an idea about the luminal narrowing. FNSC we have already discussed. So if you go for FNSC, we'll get some histopathological description of tubercular lesion. We'll get a granuloma together with caseating necrosis. A granuloma with caseating necrosis is the hallmark for the histological diagnosis of tuberculosis. And last one, if still we are in diagnostic confusion, what is the diagnosis? Then we can go for a laparoscopy, diagnostic laparoscopy. And if you go for a diagnostic laparoscopy, you will see that the peritoneum is started with some yellowish tubercle. The peritoneal surface is started with some yellowish tubercle, and you will find bands and adhesion in the abdominal cavity. Here you can also see the peritoneum started with the tubercle, and here you can see the ascites also, straw-colored ascites in the abdomen. And this is how biopsy can be taken with the help of the biopsy forceps from the tubercle in the peritoneum. So this is how we will diagnose, how we will confirm a case of tuberculosis. And now we have come to the management. And we know that the tuberculosis is a chronic disease. The patient is suffering for several months. They have anorexia. They are reluctant to take food. They might have some vomiting. So they might have some nutritional deficiency also. So nutritional support is very important in case of the management of tuberculosis. And patients with active tuberculosis require approximately 40 kilocalorie per kg of target body weight. So the calorie requirement would be 40 kilocalorie per kg of target body weight. That means suppose the patient has got a body weight of 35 kg, but to maintain a normal BMI, his weight should be 40 kg. Suppose I'm giving an example. He has body weight 35 kg, but for the normal BMI, the weight should be 40 kg. So your calculation will be 40 kilocalorie for each kg of target body weight. That is 40 into 40 because his target body weight is 40. So 40 into 40 is 1600 kilocalorie. That will be his daily requirement. A protein intake of 1.2 and 1.5 kg 5 gram per kg, 1.2 to 1.5 gram per kg of target body weight per day. The same, this is also same. Suppose a person should have 40 kg body weight to maintain a normal BMI. So his protein requirement per day will be 1.2 to 1.5 multiplied by 40. This is how we will calculate the protein requirement as well as the calorie requirement for the patient. Correction of anemia, if the patient is anemic, you have to give some blood transfusion, and if there is vomiting, if the patient is dehydrated, you have to correct the water balance and electrolyte balance first before going for anti-tubercular drug. And if the disease is without any complication, suppose the patient has no complication, tuberculosis related complication, then you can you can start anti-tubercular drug. But before starting anti-tubercular drug, you have to do a baseline liver function test and baseline renal function test. Baseline means before starting the treatment of starting the drugs for tuberculosis, because some drugs of tuberculosis like rifampicin, pyrazinamide, isoniazid, they are hepatotoxic. On the other word, the ethambutol is nephrotoxic. So you have to do the baseline liver function test and renal function test before starting anti-tubercular drug. After doing that, you can go for 4-drug regime. It is we are very much used to with 4-drug regime. We know that 4 drugs are used for initial 2 months, then 2 drugs for the continuation phase of 4 months. In 4-drug regime, you will give rifampicin, isoniazid, ethambutol, and pyrazinamide for 2 months together with pyridoxine. Why pyridoxine? To prevent drug-induced peripheral neuropathy, we will give pyridoxine. And in continuation phase of 4 months, we will give rifampicin and isoniazid together with pyridoxine. So these are 4-drug regime. Nowadays, it is said that 6 months regime, as that of pulmonary tuberculosis, is an adequate treatment for abdominal TB. Before several years, people or doctors used to say that for abdominal TB, you have to give a longer period of time, anti-TB drugs for a longer period of time. But the current guidelines says no, 6 months regime is adequate. But after 6 months, you have to check whether the lesion has subsided. If the lesion has subsided, no need to continue the drug more than 6 months. and then follow up with regular clinical examination together with liver function test. Follow up is very important in a patient who is getting treatment for abdominal TB with the help of clinical findings and liver function test. Surgery is necessary if only there is some complications, like if there is obstruction, if there is perforation, if there is massive hemorrhage, or if the fistula is not responding to antitubercular drug, then you will arrange surgery together with anti-TB drugs. And nowadays, endoscopic therapy is becoming popular for some type of lesions, like if there is esophageal stricture, if there is stricture at the bulb of the duodenum, the endoscopic balloon dilatation can make the patient comfortable. We are near the end of our today's discussion. We, we have discussed how you will treat the patient of tuberculosis, but you have to follow the markers of response, because there are some emergence of there are some drug resistant tuberculosis nowadays. So you have to follow the patient whether the patient is responding well with your treatment, and there are some markers of response. The clinical marker is the very important one. There will be resolution of symptoms and signs. Suppose the patient had fever, it has subsided, abdominal pain subsided, the patient has improved appetite, he is gaining weight. So these will give a picture that the patient is responding to your treatment. You can also take the help of lab investigation, like ESR will improve, it will come down. C-reactive protein will also come down. So lab investigation will also support that the patient is improving. Then you can go for endoscopy or colonoscopy. If the patient has got some ulcer in the previous colonoscopy or endoscopy report, you can see whether the ulcer is healing, or whether it is not responding. So you can go for endoscopic and colonoscopic test to see the ulcer is healed up. So if the ulcer is healed, so the patient has responded well. You can go for ultrasonography to see whether the ascites has resolved, whether the enlarged lymph nodes has resolved. So ultrasound will also give you some information about uh, clinical response. And last one is radiological. If the radiology says that there is normalization of the thickness of the intestinal lobes, it will suggest clinical response. So markers of response are clinical, lab investigation, endoscopic, ultrasonography, and radiological. So dear students, here today, I know most of these things are already known to you, because you used to come to the world regularly. These things are regularly discussed in the world. How a patient of tuberculosis is presenting, when you will suspect that this patient has got tuberculosis, how will you examine the patient, what will be your differential diagnosis, what are the investigations you will suggest to confirm your clinical judgment, how will you manage the patient, and how will you keep the patient in your follow-up, what will be your management if the patient has got some other complications. So all these things are known to you. Today I have just discussed, just as a recapitulate the previous discussed matter. So this is a very important topic. I hope you will try to remember the important issues, and a lot of patients will be benefited with your management. Praying for you a lot. Uh, Praying for you a lot. Hope you will stay safe with your family. Keeping a good contact with your study. Pray for us also. Thank you very much. That's all from today from my side. Stay safe. Stay happy with your family. Thank you very much.